Listen closely because what I'm about to share might completely change how you look at your pain from now on. The moment someone betrays you, especially someone who once claimed to love you, it can feel like your entire world is caving in. But what if that betrayal wasn't actually your destruction? What if it was the beginning of their unraveling and your awakening both at the same time? What if the very thing meant to break you turned out to be the moment everything quietly shifted in your favor? Stay with me all the way through, because this isn't just a story about loss. This is a story about power, clarity, and the quiet kind of victory that shows up when you finally see the truth clearly and choose yourself. Betrayal from a narcissist is never really an act of power, no matter how confident the performance looks or how justified they try to make it seem. On the surface, it can look calculated, bold, even commanding, like they're the ones steering the ship, deciding who stays and who gets discarded, deciding who deserves loyalty and who doesn't. But underneath all of that performance is fear, fragility, and a fundamental inability to sustain anything real. A narcissist doesn't betray someone because they're winning. They betray because they're losing their grip on the story they desperately need to survive. The moment they feel exposed, challenged, or emotionally dependent on someone else, betrayal becomes their exit strategy, not their triumph. Real strength holds steady. It protects. It takes responsibility. Betrayal does the exact opposite. It fractures trust, destabilizes connection, and quietly demolishes the very foundation the narcissist secretly leans on. They convince themselves that cutting someone off proves independence, when what it actually reveals is how dependent they are on manipulation just to feel superior. In that moment of betrayal, they feel a rush of relief, mistaking emotional avoidance for freedom, but that relief never lasts. What follows is a slow erosion of their inner world, because they've just removed the one thing that was actually keeping them grounded, a genuine connection. Self-destruction rarely announces itself dramatically at first. It creeps in quietly. The narcissist loses emotional depth, trades meaning for distraction, and swaps real intimacy for shallow validation. They repeat the same cycle with new people, and every time it feels a little less satisfying, a little more exhausting, a little more hollow. Betrayal doesn't teach them anything except how to run faster from themselves. Over time, the mask gets heavier, the loneliness cuts deeper, and an unavoidable realization creeps in. They didn't gain power by betraying someone who loved them. They tore down the only structure that was actually holding them together. And this is exactly where their biggest miscalculation reveals itself. Because a narcissist never betrays someone they consider insignificant. They betray someone they secretly fear, someone whose depth, empathy, and emotional intelligence threatened the fragile illusion they've built their whole identity around. From the very start, they underestimated you. Not because you lacked strength, but because your strength never needed to announce itself loudly. You didn't dominate, manipulate, or demand anything. You simply showed up consistently, loved honestly, and believed in real connection. To a narcissist, that reads as weakness. In reality, it's something they could never manufacture no matter how hard they tried. They mistook your kindness for compliance, your patience for a bottomless tolerance, your empathy for a guarantee that you'd always give them one more chance. What they never understood is that genuine people don't stick around because they're incapable of leaving. They stay because they see real potential, because they value connection, because they believe love has room to grow. And when that belief gets betrayed one too many times, it doesn't destroy the person holding it, it wakes them up. The narcissist fails to see any of this coming because they measure power through control instead of character. While they were busy testing your limits, pushing past boundaries, seeing exactly how much you'd tolerate, you were quietly learning exactly who they were. Every broken promise sharpened your awareness. Every dismissal strengthened your intuition. They thought they were wearing you down when in reality they were training you to finally see clearly. By the time the betrayal actually happened, you were already much closer to trusting yourself than they ever realized. That's exactly why the aftermath unfolds so differently for each of you. You start rebuilding from a place of truth while they're left scrambling to protect an image. You grow stronger on the inside while they go chasing validation on the outside. They underestimated the person standing in front of them, and in doing so, they lost the one soul capable of loving them beyond the performance. That loss doesn't make noise, but it's permanent, and it trails behind them long after you've already moved forward. The moment they underestimated you was the exact moment everything started turning against them, because what they believed was total control was actually exposure playing out in slow motion. Every attempted manipulation, every subtle lie, every twisted version of events they tried to sell only worked as long as you doubted yourself. The moment clarity started forming, their tactics stopped looking clever and started looking desperate instead. A narcissist never quite grasps that manipulation only survives in the dark, and awareness is the light that dismantles it completely. They thought they were the ones shaping the narrative, but really, they were exposing their own patterns in the process. They repeated the same behaviors, the same emotional traps, the same cycle of charm followed by cruelty. And repetition is exactly what gives a manipulator away. You didn't need to confront them loudly or prove anything out loud. Their own actions spoke for them. The harder they tried to control the outcome, the more obvious their insecurity became. What used to feel confusing started feeling predictable instead. This is the turning point a narcissist can never recover from. Once someone finally sees the pattern clearly, the illusion falls apart completely. You stopped reacting the way they expected you to. You started questioning things calmly instead of pleading. You pulled inward instead of chasing reassurance. And in those exact moments, their power quietly evaporated, not because you attacked them, but because you simply stopped feeding the fantasy they depended on. Exposure doesn't always happen out loud in public. Sometimes it happens quietly, internally, and that's actually far more devastating for them. You saw them clearly, without the rage, without desperation, without any need to fix or save them. That calm awareness stripped away their leverage completely. They could no longer twist your emotions or rewrite your version of reality. Their words stopped carrying weight. Their threats stopped meaning anything. And while you were reclaiming your own clarity, they were quietly losing their grip. A narcissist doesn't fall apart when they're confronted directly. They fall apart when they're truly seen. And once they're seen for exactly what they are, the version of themselves they relied on can never be rebuilt the same way again. Once that illusion collapsed and they realized you could see straight through them, the loss cut far deeper than they ever expected, because what vanished wasn't just your presence. It was their sense of self. Narcissists don't build identity the way emotionally healthy people do. They construct it entirely through reflection, through how other people respond to them, admire them, and need them. You weren't just a partner or a source of love in their life. You were the emotional mirror that made them feel significant, capable, worthy. The moment you stepped out of that role, the reflection shattered completely. They told themselves you'd be easy to replace, that anyone could fill your place, that attention is attention no matter where it comes from. But replacement was never the same as restoration. New people might offer admiration, but they don't carry any shared history. They don't understand the nuances, the emotional language, the quiet reassurance you gave without ever being asked to. What they lost when they lost you was familiarity, real depth, and the rare comfort of actually being known. And once that's gone, it simply can't be recreated on demand. This is where the narcissist starts to feel disoriented. Their confidence starts to waver. Their charm starts to feel forced. They chase validation more urgently than before, yet feel less satisfied by it every single time. The applause doesn't land the same because it's not coming from someone who once genuinely believed in them before the mask ever slipped. You validated something real, or at least something they hoped could become real. Without that anchor, they start to drift. Meanwhile, you're no longer reflecting back the curated image they built. You're no longer reinforcing their story, and that absence is deafening to them. Losing you meant losing the emotional feedback loop that made their inner emptiness feel manageable. What's left is silence, and narcissists fear silence because it leaves them alone with the truth. They believed betrayal would free them from responsibility. Instead, it stripped away the one source that made their identity feel solid to begin with, and that loss follows them quietly, relentlessly, wherever they go next. None of this collapses all at once because narcissistic ruin is rarely immediate or dramatic. It unravels slowly in ways that are nearly invisible at first, even to them. After losing you, they convince themselves they're doing fine, maybe even thriving. They distract themselves, keep performing, keep moving forward on the surface. Life looks unchanged from the outside, but underneath, something important has already been set in motion. Without the emotional anchor you used to provide, the emptiness they once managed quietly starts to widen. They begin to feel alone, even in crowded rooms. Conversations start feeling shallow. Laughter starts feeling rehearsed. The validation they chase gives them shorter and shorter bursts of relief. What used to sustain them barely touches the void anymore. This is the start of their isolation. Not because people leave them all at once, but because connection stops reaching them the way it used to. They get harder to please, quicker to irritate, more reactive than before. The people around them sense the instability, even if they can't quite put a name to it. Regret for them doesn't show up as remorse. It shows up as restlessness, as constant comparison, as an unspoken awareness that something meaningful is missing. They replay moments they once brushed off, searching for the feeling they used to pull from you so effortlessly, and when they can't recreate it, the frustration turns inward. The mask grows heavier. Keeping it up becomes exhausting. While you're slowly rebuilding your own peace, they're quietly eroding from the inside. They lose patience faster. They lose consistency. They burn bridges without ever fully understanding why. Each cycle wraps up faster than the last, each connection feeling more disposable, yet somehow more necessary at the same time. That contradiction eats away at them. Their downfall isn't public humiliation or some dramatic instant karma. It's slow emotional erosion, a life surrounded by people but empty of real intimacy, motion without meaning, noise without any actual fulfillment. Betraying you didn't destroy them overnight. It guaranteed they'd never feel whole again, and that realization settles in long after you've already started healing. In the quiet space where their world keeps quietly eroding, something completely different is happening inside you. What they meant as a wound becomes a turning point instead. The pain they caused doesn't just stay pain, it transforms into something else. At first, it feels unbearable, like a weight sitting on your chest, like a fog that refuses to clear. But pain, when you face it honestly, has a strange kind of intelligence to it. It demands answers. It pushes you inward. It forces you to actually listen to yourself in ways comfort never could. While the narcissist avoids reflection at all costs, you get pulled straight into it. You start asking yourself questions they'll never ask themselves. You examine the patterns, not to assign blame, but to actually understand. You start noticing where you gave too much, where you ignored your own gut, where you confuse someone's potential with their actual reality. This isn't self-punishment, this is waking up. And with every realization, you reclaim a piece of yourself that had slowly dimmed over time. Your healing doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly in the boundaries you now set, in the silence where you used to over-explain yourself, in the discernment you now bring where hope without evidence used to live. The very experiences that once drained you now become the source of your clarity. The betrayal that was supposed to knock you off balance becomes the exact event that anchors you back to yourself. Meanwhile, the narcissist stays stuck at the point of avoidance. They repeat the same cycles because growth requires accountability, and accountability threatens the fragile image they're desperate to protect. You move forward because you're willing to actually feel things. They stay trapped because they refuse to face themselves. This is where your two paths permanently split. Your pain turns into wisdom. Their discomfort turns into denial. You gain depth, self-trust, and real emotional resilience. They lose ground, chasing relief without ever finding resolution. What used to connect you now separates you entirely, and the irony is impossible to miss. In trying to destroy you, they handed you the exact catalyst you needed to grow. And in refusing to grow themselves, they guaranteed their own stagnation. That's the quiet reversal they never saw coming. As you settle into this new awareness, another truth becomes unmistakably clear. One the narcissist only understands far too late. Real love isn't interchangeable. It's not something you can toss aside and swap out without any consequence. What you gave wasn't just affection or attention. It was presence, patience, and emotional honesty. You loved with depth, with consistency, with a willingness to sit in discomfort just to protect the connection. That kind of love is rare, and once it's gone, it can't just be recreated on command. The narcissist believed love was some kind of resource they could always find more of elsewhere. If one source dried up, another would eventually show up. But as they move from one connection to the next, they start noticing the difference, even if they can't quite put words to it. New people might admire the surface, but they don't offer the same grounding. They don't see through the bravado or stick around when the vulnerability underneath finally shows. They don't stay once the charm fades. And slowly, the narcissist realizes what they actually lost with you wasn't comfort, it was stability. For them, regret doesn't sound like an apology, it sounds like constant comparison. Every new interaction gets measured against the emotional safety they once took completely for granted. Every disagreement feels sharper now. Every absence feels louder. They replay the moments you showed up for them without being asked, when you believed in them without needing proof. Those memories stay because they can't be replaced. You, meanwhile, are no longer waiting around to be chosen. Your healing has taught you that love has to be mutual, to actually be real. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy or sacrifice with devotion. While they chase the echo of what they once had, you're busy building something grounded and built to last. By the time the narcissist fully understands what authentic love was actually worth, it's already gone, and that realization trails them quietly, persistently, long after you've learned to give that same love back to yourself. As you turn that love inward and start rebuilding from a place of truth, another contrast becomes impossible to miss. Healing lifts you up, bitterness weighs them down. You had every reason to stay angry, to keep replaying the betrayal, to let resentment define who you are. But healing teaches you something a narcissist never learns. Pain that's actually processed turns into freedom. Pain that's avoided turns into a prison. You chose to feel it, to grieve it, to understand it. And in doing that, you loosen the grip the past had on you. The narcissist, on the other hand, can't afford to let go of their bitterness because it's what helps them avoid accountability. They rewrite the story to protect their own image, casting themselves as misunderstood or wronged. That version might soothe them temporarily, but it keeps them stuck in the exact same emotional loop. Every grievance becomes just another brick in the walls they're living inside. They stay reactive, defensive, suspicious, unable to find real peace, because peace requires honesty they're not willing to give. As you heal, your whole energy shifts. You're no longer trying to prove anything. You move with clarity instead of urgency. You respond instead of react. Life starts feeling lighter, not because everything's perfect, but because you're no longer carrying weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. That lightness is noticeable. It draws in healthier connections and quietly repels the chaos you once treated as normal. Meanwhile, bitterness isolates the narcissist even further. Relationships start feeling adversarial. Trust starts feeling risky. Every interaction gets filtered through a fear of exposure or abandonment. They might still look confident from the outside, but underneath, there's a constant tension that never really settles. Healing would free them from all of it, but healing demands vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens the persona they cling to so tightly, so the distance between you keeps growing. You rise into peace while they stay anchored to resentment, not because you were stronger from the start, but because you were willing to let go. As peace starts replacing the chaos inside you, the final illusion breaks completely, because betrayal has a way of stripping away everything that was never real to begin with. For you, that illusion was the hope that love alone could change someone who was never willing to face themselves. For the narcissist, it was the belief that control could ever stand in for real connection. When betrayal happens, both illusions shatter, but the outcomes couldn't look more different. You come out the other side with clarity. You see the relationship for exactly what it was, not through nostalgia or longing, but through honest truth. You recognize that what you felt was real, even if what you received wasn't. That understanding doesn't harden you, it grounds you. You stop romanticizing potential and start honoring what's actually real. The fantasy dissolves, but your ability to love stays intact, now protected by wisdom you didn't have before. For the narcissist, that same illusion shatters in a much more painful way. They're forced to confront the limits of their own control. Betrayal exposes exactly what they've worked so hard to avoid, that manipulation doesn't create loyalty, that fear doesn't create love, and that power doesn't create fulfillment. What they thought kept people close turns out to be the very thing that drives everyone away. And instead of accepting that truth, they resist it, clinging to whatever's left of a false identity. This divergence is decisive. You build your future on what's real. They try to rebuild theirs on performance. You accept loss as part of growing. They treat loss as something to keep outrunning, so the cycle continues for them, while it finally ends for you. Betrayal breaks illusions for both people involved, but only one of you is willing to let the truth actually reshape you. The other spends their life protecting a lie. And that single choice decides who finds peace and who stays stuck, endlessly searching for it. As that truth fully settles into you, one last understanding rises with quiet certainty. You didn't survive this to prove anything to them. You didn't heal to be seen, admired, or validated by the person who betrayed you. Your survival was never about revenge, because revenge keeps you tethered to the very pain you worked so hard to release. What you chose instead was freedom, and freedom changes everything. Freedom looks like no longer needing closure from someone who was never honest with you in the first place. It looks like waking up without the weight of confusion, without rehearsing old conversations in your head, without questioning your own worth. It looks like choosing peace even when part of you still wants answers. That choice isn't weakness, it's mastery. It's the moment you take your life back from the past. The narcissist, meanwhile, stays bound to the consequences of their own choices. While you move forward, they're still looking backward, still measuring, still comparing, still wondering why nothing feels the same anymore. Your absence becomes a quiet reminder of exactly what they lost, not because you set out to punish them, but because you simply outgrew whatever space they had to offer. That's the kind of consequence they can't escape. You never needed to destroy them. Their own patterns handle that well enough on their own. What you did was choose yourself when it mattered most. You chose growth over bitterness, truth over fantasy, peace over chaos. That decision set you free. And so the story doesn't end with their downfall. It ends with your liberation. You carry the lessons, the strength, and the clarity forward into a life that finally feels aligned and whole. They carry the echo of everything they lost. That's not revenge. That's victory. And once that freedom truly settles in, it becomes clear this was never really a story about their downfall at all. It was about the quiet, powerful life you stepped into the moment you stopped trying to survive someone else's chaos. Your survival doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself with explanations or victory laps. It shows up in calm mornings, in steady boundaries, in the deep sense of safety you've built inside yourself. It shows up in the fact that you no longer chase, no longer beg, no longer abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. This is where real growth actually lives. Not in proving you were right, but in realizing you no longer need to be understood by someone who chose betrayal over honesty. You learn that peace isn't passive. It's active, intentional, earned. It's choosing yourself over and over again, even when old patterns try to pull you backward. It's understanding that freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of self-respect. The narcissist stays stuck in a different loop entirely. They keep mistaking intensity for connection, attention for love. They may move forward in time, but never in depth. While you're building a life rooted in authenticity, they're still performing for approval, still negotiating their worth through everyone but themselves. Your healing creates expansion. Their avoidance creates repetition. What separates you now isn't anger or distance. It's awareness. You know who you are without needing anyone else to reflect it back at you. You trust your own instincts, you honor your own limits, and because of that, your life starts to feel aligned instead of chaotic, meaningful instead of draining. Here's the final truth. You didn't escape to win. You escaped to actually live. Your growth was never a reaction to their betrayal. It was a return to yourself, and that return is the one place they will never be able to follow you. You didn't just survive them, you reclaimed your entire life. So if you're still here, still feeling this in your chest, let this be the moment you understand what this whole journey was really about. It was never about being chosen by someone incapable of choosing themselves. It was about remembering who you were before the confusion made you doubt your own worth. The betrayal didn't define you. It revealed you. It stripped away the illusion and handed you back your own truth. Stronger, clearer, more grounded than you've ever been. What you walked through wasn't meaningless pain. It was a passage. A crossing from survival into self-respect, from silence into clarity, from longing into peace. You now carry discernment where there used to be hope without boundaries. You carry wisdom where there used to be self-sacrifice. And that is a kind of power the narcissist will never understand because it doesn't need an audience to be real. As this chapter closes, hold on to this. The people who try to break others are already broken inside themselves. You didn't lose them. You outgrew the role that once required you to abandon yourself just to keep them comfortable. And in doing that, you reclaimed your voice, your energy, and your future. If this message reached you, it's because some part of you is already stepping into something better. Stay close to that part. Protect it. Trust it. Let this be the last time you mistake endurance for love. Let this be the moment you choose peace without needing to apologize for it. And as you keep moving forward, know this for certain. The life waiting for you on the other side of healing isn't smaller, it's fuller, quieter, stronger, and it belongs entirely to you.